In the vast expanse of the galactic frontier, where energy weapons carve through armor like paper and plasma rifles can level buildings, there exists a truth that most alien species refuse to acknowledge. Humans don't just fight wars, they win them with whatever tools they can find. While the galaxy moved towards sophisticated electromagnetic pulse weapons and molecular disruptors, humanity clung to something the universe considered laughably primitive: kinetic projectile weapons, bullets, gunpowder, the simple, brutal physics of metal moving very, very fast. Captain Zara Chen carried an antique that made her alien squad mates snicker behind their mandibles, claws, and tentacles. Her M1911 pistol, a design over 8 centuries old, seemed pathetic next to their gleaming plasma carbines and photon disruptors. They called it a museum piece, a relic, a joke. But in the killing fields of Kepler 438b, where the most elite alien strike force in the galaxy would face a single human with 8 bullets, the universe was about to learn why humanity had never lost a war. Sometimes the oldest tricks are the deadliest ones, and sometimes being underestimated is the greatest weapon of all. 8 bullets. 1 human. An entire alien unit about to discover why Earth's warriors were feared across 1,000 star systems. The transport vessel Nexus Dawn hummed through the void between star systems, its hull reflecting the distant light of binary suns. Inside the tactical briefing room, 12 of the galaxy's most elite soldiers sat around a holographic display table, their various appendages and sensory organs focused on the mission ahead. The air recyclers worked overtime to accommodate the different atmospheric preferences of the mixed species unit. Kralix needed higher nitrogen, the Vorthak required trace amounts of methane, and the crystalline Zelthrani absorbed ambient electromagnetic radiation instead of breathing at all. At the head of the table stood Commander Vexstar, a towering hegemony officer whose chitinous exoskeleton gleamed under the artificial lights. His 4 arms gestured at the rotating hologram of a planet, Kepler 438b, a contested world on the rim of known space, where human colonists had established what they called illegal settlements. The planet's surface showed green and blue swirls, deceptively peaceful from orbit. The target is Outpost Meridian. Vexstar's translator converted his clicking mandible sounds into galactic standard. Intelligence suggests minimal resistance. Approximately 30 human civilians with basic defensive capabilities. Our objective is simple: eliminate all inhabitants and secure the mining rights for the consortium. Scattered around the table, the elite soldiers of the Crimson Talon unit nodded their various forms of acknowledgement. There was Korath, a massive Bruthan whose dense muscle fibers could stop most energy weapons. The twin Savari assassins whisper in shadow, their scaled hides shifting color to match their surroundings. Quantum, a Nexari whose body existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, making him nearly impossible to target. Each member of this unit had been chosen for their unique abilities and had never failed a mission. And then there was the human. Captain Zara Chen sat quietly at the far end of the table, her dark eyes studying the planetary data, while her fingers unconsciously traced the worn grip of her sidearm. Unlike the gleaming energy weapons carried by her teammates, Zara's holster contained something that looked like it belonged in a museum. The other soldiers had noticed it during their first briefing 3 weeks ago, and the jokes had never stopped. "Tell me, human," Skrell the Vorthak wheezed, his tentacle-like appendages writhing with amusement, "when did you last upgrade your equipment? That primitive slug thrower you carry looks like something from your planet's Bronze Age." The translator made Zara's quiet chuckle sound mechanical. "It's actually from the early 21st century. Still works perfectly." This sent ripples of laughter through the assembled aliens. Even Vexstar's mandibles clicked in what passed for hegemony humor. The idea that anyone would carry a kinetic projectile weapon into modern combat was absurd. Energy weapons could pierce advanced armor, had virtually unlimited ammunition through power cells, and could be configured for different effects. A gunpowder weapon was simply primitive. Korath's booming voice filled the room. Human weapons evolution stopped when they learned to make fire. While we perfected plasma containment and quantum disruption, they still point metal tubes and make loud noises. The archaeological value alone makes it worth keeping, added one of the Sivari twins, her scales shifting to an amused purple pattern. Perhaps after the mission we can donate it to the Galactic Military Museum. Zara remained silent, her expression neutral. She had heard variations of these jokes for months since being assigned to the Crimson Talon unit. As the only human in an elite alien strike force, she was constantly reminded of her species' supposed inferiority. The Terran Federation had been reluctantly admitted to the Galactic Consortium only 50 years ago, and most alien species still viewed humans as crude newcomers who had stumbled into space through luck rather than skill. What they didn't know, what Zara had never told them, was her history. Before joining the Consortium forces, she had served 20 years in the Terran Colonial Marines, participating in the brutal Centauri Rebellion, the Silicon Valley Uprising on Mars, and the infamous Zero-G assault on Europa Station. She had been awarded the Sol Cross twice, the Terran Federation's highest military honor, and had personally trained 3 generations of human special forces operators. But none of that mattered to her alien teammates. All they saw was the primitive weapon at her side and the backwards human carrying it. Commander Vextar brought the briefing back to focus. Deployment will commence in 6 hours. The human settlement has basic defensive shields and a handful of security personnel. Intelligence indicates they have standard consortium-issue energy weapons and possibly some human kinetic weapons. His tone made it clear what he thought of the latter. "Resistance timeline?" asked Quantum, his voice seeming to come from multiple dimensions at once. "Estimated 47 minutes from initial contact to complete neutralization," Vextar replied. "The humans have no military vessels in the system and no orbital defenses. This will be a simple ground operation." Whisper, the more talkative of the Sivari twins, leaned forward. "What about civilian evacuation protocols?" "There are no civilian evacuation protocols," Vextar stated flatly. "Consortium High Command has classified this as a cleansing operation. No survivors." The room fell silent. Even among these hardened soldiers, the casual mention of murdering 30 innocent colonists was sobering. But orders were orders, and the Crimson Talon unit had built their reputation on following them without question. Zara felt a familiar weight settle in her stomach. She had joined the Consortium forces believing she could make a difference, that humanity's perspective could help bring peace to the galaxy. Instead, she found herself part of a military machine that crushed anyone who stood in the way of corporate profits. As the briefing continued with tactical details and weapon assignments, Zara's mind wandered to her grandfather, who had given her the M191 pistol on her 18th birthday. He had been a soldier too, in Earth's last global conflict, and he had told her something she never forgot. "Technology changes, Zara, but combat doesn't. When everything else fails, when your fancy gadgets break down or run out of power, it's the simple tools that save your life." This old pistol has saved more lives than you'll ever know. She had carried it through every battle since, even as she was issued increasingly advanced consortium weapons. The M191 had never let her down, and more importantly, it reminded her of who she was beneath the alien uniform. "Questions?" Vextar asked as the hologram faded. Korath raised one massive arm. "Rules of engagement? Eliminate all resistance. Secure the mining facilities. Complete the mission." Vextar's 4 eyes fixed on each team member in turn. The humans chose to ignore consortium warnings. They sealed their own fate. As the team began to disperse, Skrell slithered over to Zara with his characteristic wheezed laughter. "Don't worry, human. When the shooting starts, stay behind us real soldiers. That antique pop gun might make noise, but it won't stop anything more dangerous than a civilian." Zara looked up at the Vorthak's writhing face and smiled, an expression that didn't reach her eyes. "I'll keep that in mind." Seriously, though, Whisper chimed in, her scales shifting to a concerned orange. Why do you carry that thing? Command would issue you proper equipment if you asked. It's reliable, Zara replied simply. Reliable? Shadow laughed, her scales mimicking her twin's colors. My plasma carbine can punch through 6 inches of durasteel and has enough power for 300 shots. What can your little toy do? Zara stood, checking her equipment one final time. Her answer was quiet, almost conversational. It can put a .45 caliber hole exactly where I want it, every single time, in any weather, at any temperature, after being buried in mud for a week or soaked in water for a month. It doesn't need power cells, it doesn't overheat, and it's never failed to fire when I pulled the trigger. The aliens exchanged looks that clearly said, "Stubborn primitive human," and dispersed to their quarters. Alone in the briefing room, Zara holstered her weapon and stared at the now empty holographic display. In 6 hours, she would be part of a massacre. 30 innocent humans would die because they had refused to abandon their homes to alien corporations. She thought about requesting a transfer or even reporting the mission to Terran Federation authorities. But she knew it would make no difference. The consortium had too much power, and humanity was still too weak to challenge them directly. Instead, she made a different decision. Walking to her quarters, Zara began to methodically prepare for the mission ahead. But, unlike her teammates who were planning for a quick strike against helpless civilians, Zara was preparing for something else entirely. She cleaned her M191 with practiced precision, checking each component and loading 8 rounds into the magazine. 8 bullets. That's all she would have when the time came. But Zara Chen had learned something during her 20 years as a colonial marine. Something her alien teammates were about to discover. It wasn't the weapon that made the soldier dangerous. It was the soldier that made the weapon deadly. And sometimes, just sometimes, being underestimated was the greatest tactical advantage of all. The transport ship hummed through space toward Kepler 438b, carrying 12 elite alien soldiers who believed they were heading to an easy victory over primitive humans. They had no idea that one of those primitive humans was planning to teach them exactly why Earth had never lost a war. Kepler 438b hung before them like a jewel against the cosmic darkness, its blue-green surface marbled with white clouds that drifted lazily across continents and oceans. The planet's twin moons cast silver light across the night side, where the human settlement of Outpost Meridian showed, as a small cluster of lights near the equator. The Nexus Dawn settled into high orbit while its crew prepared the assault shuttles. In the armory, the Crimson Talon unit made their final equipment checks under the harsh glare of combat lighting. The atmosphere was professional but relaxed. This was, after all, supposed to be a simple operation against minimally defended civilians. Zara stood at her equipment locker, securing her gear with the methodical precision of a veteran soldier. Her armor was standard consortium issue, adaptive camouflage, plating over kinetic mesh, environmental seals, and integrated communication systems. But unlike her teammates' loadouts, which featured backup energy weapons and redundant power cells, Zara's kit was notably sparse. "Where's your heavy weapon?" Korth asked, his massive frame blocking out half the armory as he hefted a plasma cannon that could level small buildings. "Don't need one," Zara replied, checking her sidearm one final time before holstering it. Quantum's multi-dimensional voice carried notes of disbelief. "No backup weapon, no demolition charges. Human, are you planning to complete this mission through interpretive dance?" The assembled aliens found this hilarious. Even Vextar's mandibles clicked appreciatively as he attached his 4th weapon to his equipment harness, a molecular disruptor that could literally disassemble matter at the atomic level. "Look," Whisper said, her scales shifting to what Zara had learned was the Savari equivalent of genuine concern. "We know you're new to consortium operations. There's no shame in carrying extra firepower. The Terran Federation issues pulse rifles, doesn't it?" Zara finished sealing her armor and turned to face the group. "I've got everything I need." Skrell's tentacles writhed with amusement. 8 bullets? That's everything you need? What happens when you face 9 enemies? Then I'll have to be more creative, Zara said simply. The joke fell flat because none of the aliens were quite sure she was joking. Shadow, always the more analytical of the Savari twins, studied Zara with calculating eyes. "You know, human, your psychological profile indicated extensive combat experience, but watching you prepare, I'm beginning to wonder if Terran military records were exaggerated. Maybe they count training exercises as real combat," suggested one of the other team members, a insectoid klitch whose compound eyes glittered with cruel humor. Vextar called for attention before Zara could respond. "Final briefing. Intelligence update from orbital reconnaissance." The holographic display activated, showing a 3-dimensional map of Outpost Meridian. The settlement was larger than the initial reports had suggested. Nearly 200 structures arranged in a defensive pattern around a central mining complex. Gardens and workshops indicated a well-established community that had been growing for years. Population estimate revised upward, Vextar announced. Approximately 230 human civilians. However, this doesn't change our operational parameters. Zara studied the display intently. She could see playgrounds, schools, what looked like a small medical facility. These weren't just colonists, they were families, children, people who had come to this distant world looking for a better life only to find themselves in the crosshairs of corporate greed. "Defense assessment?" asked Koreth. "Minimal. Basic energy shields around the perimeter, probably civilian grade. A few watchtowers with what appear to be standard security personnel. No heavy weapons detected. No military vehicles." Vextar's tone was dismissive. "The humans appear to have relied on their illegal status to protect them, believing the consortium wouldn't bother with such a small settlement." "Mistake," muttered Quantum. "Fatal mistake," agreed the Klitsch soldier. Zara remained silent, but her jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Deployment will be in 3 waves," Vextar continued. "Whisper and Shadow will infiltrate the perimeter and disable communications. Koreth, Quantum, and Skrell will take the main defensive positions. The rest of us will advance on the central complex and eliminate any remaining resistance." "What about the human?" Shadow asked, nodding toward Zara. Vextar's 4 eyes regarded Zara with what might have been pity. "Captain Chen will provide support. Stay back, observe consortium tactics, try not to get in the way." The dismissal was clear. Zara was being treated like a trainee, allowed to tag along with the real soldiers but not expected to contribute meaningfully to the mission. "Understood," Zara said quietly. As the team finished their preparations and moved toward the shuttle bay, Zara lingered for a moment at the holographic display. She memorized the settlement layout, noting escape routes, defensive positions, and most importantly, the locations that showed the highest concentrations of life signs, the schools and residential areas where families would be sleeping. In her earpiece, she heard the familiar pre-mission chatter of professional soldiers. The aliens discussed tactical approaches, shared crude jokes about human weakness, and speculated about how quickly they could complete the massacre. None of them noticed that their human teammate wasn't joining the conversation. The assault shuttle Crimson Talon was a sleek predator designed for rapid deployment and overwhelming firepower. Its adaptive hull could become virtually invisible to most detection systems, and its weapon arrays could level city blocks if necessary. As they descended through Kepler 438b's atmosphere, the shuttle's systems painted detailed tactical information across their helmet displays. "Approaching drop zone," announced the pilot. "Weather conditions optimal. No defensive response detected." Through the shuttle's viewports, Zara could see Outpost Meridian spread out below them. The settlement looked peaceful in the pre-dawn darkness, with only a few lights marking essential facilities. Somewhere down there, families were sleeping safely in their beds, unaware that death was descending from the stars. 2 minutes to insertion, Vexstar called out. Remember, this is a cleansing operation. No survivors means no survivors. Efficiency is key. We want to be off-planet before any Terran Federation vessels can respond to distress signals. The team checked their weapons one final time. Energy cells hummed to life, targeting systems activated, and lethal efficiency was prepared to be unleashed on innocent civilians. Zara closed her eyes and thought of her grandfather again. He had served in the last great war of Earth's history, a conflict that had nearly destroyed human civilization. But he had also told her about the moments when soldiers had to choose between following orders and doing what was right. Sometimes, Zara, he had said, you have to decide what kind of person you want to be when everything is on the line. Orders are just words. But your actions, those define your soul. 1 minute, called the pilot. Zara opened her eyes and looked at her teammates. They were all focused on their equipment, running through mental checklists, and preparing for what they saw as a routine operation. None of them were thinking about the sleeping families below. None of them were questioning the morality of murdering civilians for corporate profit. But Zara was thinking about something else entirely. She was thinking about how to save 230 innocent lives with 8 bullets. 30 seconds. The shuttle's drop bay doors opened, revealing the dark landscape rushing past below. The team moved into position, their various forms of locomotion preparing to deliver death from above. 10 seconds. Zara's hand rested on her sidearm, but not for the reasons her teammates expected. Drop, drop, drop. The Crimson Talon unit deployed into the darkness above Outpost Meridian, 12 elite alien soldiers descending like angels of death toward a sleeping human settlement. But as they fell through the night sky, one of those soldiers was making calculations that had nothing to do with killing civilians and everything to do with protecting them. Zara Chen had spent her entire military career learning how to win impossible battles against overwhelming odds. She had studied human military history, absorbed the lessons of countless conflicts, and mastered the art of turning disadvantage into advantage. Now, as she descended toward what her teammates expected to be a massacre, Zara was about to teach the galaxy's most elite soldiers the first rule of human warfare. Never underestimate the lengths a human will go to protect the innocent. The ground rushed up to meet them, and with it, the moment of truth. 8 bullets. 1 human. And a choice that would define not just her soul, but the future of human-alien relations in a galaxy that was about to learn why Earth's warriors were legends. The landing zone was a cleared field approximately 1 kilometer from Outpost Meridian's perimeter. The Crimson Talon team touched down silently in the pre-dawn darkness, their advanced equipment masking their presence from the settlement's basic sensors. Above them, the twin moons cast enough light to see by, but not enough to compromise their stealth approach. Vexstar activated his command display, showing each team member's position as glowing dots on a tactical map. Phase 1, Initiation. Whisper and Shadow, begin your approach to the communications array. Korath, Quantum, Skrell. Take positions Alpha, Beta, and Gamma around the perimeter. Everyone else, follow me toward the main complex. The team dispersed with professional efficiency. Zara watched as the Savari twins seemed to melt into the landscape, their camouflage scales making them nearly invisible even to her enhanced vision. Korath's massive form moved with surprising stealth toward the settlement's main gate, while Quantum simply faded, his multi-dimensional existence allowing him to exist partially outside normal space. Human, Vexstar's translated voice carried a note of impatience. Stay close and observe. Try not to interfere with the operation. Zara nodded and fell into step behind the commander, but her mind was racing through possibilities. She had perhaps 10 minutes before the killing began. 10 minutes to figure out how to turn the galaxy's most elite strike team against each other without getting the civilians caught in the crossfire. As they moved through the tall grass toward the settlement, Zara made her first move. "Commander," she said quietly into her comm system, "I'm reading some unusual energy signatures from the settlement."
Could be defensive systems we weren't briefed about. Vexstar paused, consulting his sensors.
"I see nothing irregular. Your equipment may be malfunctioning." "Maybe," Zara agreed, "but human sensors are calibrated differently. We might be picking up something your tech can't detect." It was a lie, but a plausible one. The galaxy's various species had different sensory capabilities, and it was conceivable that human technology might detect something alien sensors missed. Vexstar's mandibles clicked with annoyance, but he activated his comm system. "All units maintain extra vigilance. Possible, undetected defensive systems." Zara smiled grimly. Step 1 complete. Introduce uncertainty and paranoia into a team that had expected an easy victory. They reached the settlement's outer perimeter just as Whisper's voice crackled through the comm system. "Communications array located. Beginning infiltration." Outpost Meridian's defensive shield was indeed civilian-grade, designed more to keep out wildlife than military forces. The energy barrier hummed softly, casting a faint blue glow over the sleeping community beyond. Through the translucent field, Zara could see houses, shops, gardens, all the signs of a thriving human colony that had carved out a life on this distant world. "Shield generator?" Vexstar asked. "There," Zara pointed to a small structure near the main gate. "Standard design. Should be easy to disable." But as Korath moved toward the generator, Zara made her second move. "Wait!" she whispered urgently into her comm. "Movement in the settlement. Looks like security patrols." Every member of the Crimson Talon team froze, their weapons raised and senses alert. "I don't see anything," Quantum's multidimensional voice reported. "Neither do I," added Skrell from his position. Zara's voice was tense with apparent concern. "Human thermal vision is different from yours. I'm definitely seeing heat signatures moving through the settlement. Could be they detected our approach somehow." This wasn't entirely false. There were heat signatures moving through the settlement, but they belonged to a few insomniacs, late-shift workers, and someone apparently making an early morning trip to the bathroom. Nothing that posed any threat to heavily armed professional soldiers. But Zara's teammates didn't know that. "How many?" Vexstar demanded. Zara pretended to study her readings. "Hard to tell, maybe a dozen, moving in what looks like patrol patterns." The commander's 4 eyes narrowed as he consulted his own sensors. Alien technology was sophisticated, but it was calibrated for alien physiology. Human heat signatures, human movement patterns, human defensive strategies. These were all outside the parameters that consortium equipment was designed to detect. "Whisper Shadow, what's your status on the communications array? But if there are patrols, we might be walking into an ambush." Zara could hear the uncertainty creeping into her teammates' voices. These were soldiers accustomed to having overwhelming technological superiority and complete intelligence about their targets. The suggestion that the humans might have detected their approach and prepared a defense was deeply unsettling. "Change of plans," Vexstar decided. "We go in hard and fast, no stealth approach." "Korath, disable that shield generator now." The massive Bruthan warrior approached the generator housing and raised his plasma cannon. But just as he prepared to fire, Zara made her most crucial intervention. "Commander, wait!" Her voice was sharp with apparent alarm. "That's not a standard generator." Korath paused, his weapon still trained on the target. "What do you mean?" Vexstar demanded. Zara moved closer, pretending to study the structure with her human sensors. In reality, she was buying time and sowing more confusion. "The energy signature is all wrong. This isn't just a shield generator, it's some kind of hybrid system. If we hit it with plasma, we might trigger a feedback cascade." "Meaning what exactly?" Shadow's voice carried over the comm from her concealed position. "Meaning it could overload and take out everything within a 2-kilometer radius," Zara said grimly, "including us." This was complete fabrication, but it was technically plausible. Energy weapon interactions could be unpredictable, and alien soldiers were naturally cautious about engaging unknown human technology. The team hesitated, their confidence shaken by the possibility that their simple mission might be more complicated than expected. "How do we disable it safely?" Vextar asked. Zara pretended to consider the problem. "I'd need to get closer, maybe interface with it directly. Human technology responds better to human operators." "Absolutely not," the commander replied immediately. "Too dangerous for a novice operative. With respect, sir, I'm the only one here with experience in human defensive systems, and if I'm right about the patrol situation, we need to move fast before they can coordinate a response." It was a masterful piece of manipulation. Zara had created a sense of urgency while positioning herself as the only solution to a problem she had invented. Her teammates were skilled soldiers, but they weren't trained in human psychological warfare. "Fine," Vextar decided. "But you have 2 minutes. If you can't disable it safely, we fall back and call for orbital bombardment." Zara nodded and approached the generator housing. As she worked, she activated a private communication channel, one that she had modified during the flight to Kepler 438b. Instead of connecting to her teammates, it linked directly to the settlement's emergency broadcast system. "Outpost Meridian, this is Captain Zara Chen, Terran Federation Marines," she whispered into her comm, her voice barely audible but perfectly clear to anyone monitoring the settlement's communication array. "You have approximately 90 seconds before an alien strike team begins their assault. This is not a drill. Evacuate all civilians to emergency shelters immediately. Security personnel should prepare for hostile contact." On her external comm channel, she kept up a steady stream of technical-sounding commentary about the generator's supposed complexity, giving the impression that she was working to safely disable it. In the settlement, emergency lights began to activate as her warning was received and acted upon. To her alien teammates, watching through their sensors, it looked like the human defensive systems were coming online in response to their presence. "Commander," Quantum reported, his voice tense. "Massive energy spike from the settlement. They definitely know we're here. Multiple systems activating," Skrell added. "This is not civilian-grade equipment." Zara allowed herself a small smile as she worked. The settlement's emergency systems were indeed civilian-grade, but they were also designed by humans who understood that sometimes the best defense was to make your enemy think you were more dangerous than you actually were. "Almost got it," she reported to her team while continuing her whispered warnings to the settlement. "All civilians to shelters. Security teams to positions. Unknown hostiles with heavy weapons." Through the settlement's shield, she could see lights coming on in buildings as families were roused from sleep and guided to safety. The colony's emergency protocols were functioning exactly as designed, not to fight off a military assault, but to get innocent people out of harm's way as quickly as possible. "There," Zara announced, stepping back from the generator. "Shield is down, but I had to reroute the power systems. Their defensive grid is going to be unpredictable for the next few minutes." The blue energy field flickered and disappeared, leaving Outpost Meridian apparently defenseless. But Zara had just accomplished something remarkable. In less than 10 minutes, she had warned the settlement, gotten civilians to safety, shaken her teammates' confidence, and positioned herself as their guide into what they now believed was a potentially dangerous situation. 8 bullets. That's all she had when the killing started. But she had just ensured that when the shooting began, it would be between soldiers, not between soldiers and innocent families. The real battle was about to begin, and the galaxy's most elite strike team was about to learn their first lesson in human warfare. The most dangerous enemy is the one who's already inside your defenses. "Move in," Vextar commanded. "Stay alert. These humans are more prepared than we thought." As the Crimson Talon team advanced toward the settlement, none of them noticed that their human teammate had just saved 230 lives before firing a single shot. But the night was far from over, and Zara Chen was just getting started. The Crimson Talon team moved through the now unshielded perimeter of Outpost Meridian with weapons raised and nerves on edge. The settlement that had appeared peaceful from orbit now seemed ominous in the pre-dawn darkness, with emergency lights casting long shadows between buildings and the occasional flicker of movement visible through windows. "Something's wrong," Quantum muttered, his multi-dimensional senses picking up energy patterns that didn't match the intelligence briefing. "This place feels occupied." "Of course it's occupied," Korath rumbled, his plasma cannon sweeping across the empty streets. "We're here to kill the occupants." "No," Quantum insisted. "I mean actively occupied, defensively occupied. Like they're waiting for us." Zara moved with the group, her sidearm remaining holstered while her teammates brandished increasingly heavy weapons. To any observer, she appeared to be the least dangerous person present, exactly as she intended. "Movement," Whisper reported from her advanced position. "Multiple contacts in the central building." Vexstar consulted his tactical display. "Security personnel? Unknown. Thermal signatures are odd, not quite matching standard human patterns." Zara knew why the signatures were odd. The people in that building were families huddled in emergency shelters, their body heat masked by the settlement's protective systems and their fear making their vital signs irregular. But her teammates' alien sensors couldn't distinguish between terrified civilians and armed defenders. "Could be human combat modifications," Zara suggested quietly. "Some colonies use genetic enhancements to adapt to local conditions. Might throw off your sensors." The lie was plausible enough to worry soldiers who were already dealing with unexpected complications. "Approach with extreme caution," Vexstar ordered. "If these humans have military-grade enhancements, they could be more dangerous than anticipated." As they moved deeper into the settlement, Zara began implementing the second phase of her plan. The streets of Outpost Meridian were laid out in a defensive pattern, not because the colonists expected military assault, but because human settlements were designed with practical considerations like fire safety and efficient resource distribution. However, those same design principles created natural choke points and ambush opportunities. Zara had memorized the settlement layout during the orbital reconnaissance phase, and now she began to guide her teammates into increasingly vulnerable positions. "Commander," she said, pointing toward a narrow alley between two storage buildings, "that route leads directly to the main complex. We could flank their defensive positions." It was true that the alley led to the main complex. What Zara didn't mention was that it also led directly through the settlement's industrial section, where heavy machinery and stored materials could provide excellent cover for anyone wanting to stage an ambush. "Good thinking, human," Vexstar replied. "Korath, take point. Everyone else, standard formation." The team moved into the alley, their weapons ready and senses alert. But as they advanced, Zara made her next move. She had noticed something during their approach that her alien teammates had missed: the settlement security cameras. They were civilian-grade equipment, designed primarily to monitor for wildlife or equipment failures, but they were also networked throughout the colony. Using her modified communication system, Zara tapped into the camera network and activated the settlement's public address system. "Attention, Crimson Talon team!" Her voice echoed from speakers throughout Outpost Meridian, but heavily disguised by electronic distortion. "You are surrounded. Surrender now, or face the consequences." The effect on her teammates was immediate and dramatic. "Contact!" Skrull shouted, his tentacles writhing in agitation. "Hostile communications! They know our unit designation," Shadow hissed, her scales shifting to aggressive red patterns. "This is a trap." The team immediately took defensive positions, their weapons trained on the surrounding buildings, but there was nothing to shoot at, just shadows, empty windows, and the echoing threat from an unknown source. "How did they know our unit name?" Whisper demanded. "Intelligence leak," Vexstar decided grimly. The humans have been monitoring consortium communications. Book. It was exactly the conclusion Zara had hoped for. Her teammates were now convinced that they were facing a sophisticated enemy who had been preparing for their arrival. Orders, sir? Korath asked, his massive weapons sweeping across potential firing positions. Continue the mission, Vextar commanded, but assume we're facing enhanced resistance. As they moved forward, Zara activated her communication system again, this time broadcasting on a frequency she knew the settlement security team would be monitoring. This is Captain Chen, she whispered. 11 hostiles advancing through Sector 7. Recommend you activate the emergency lighting grid and sound general alarm. Make it look like you're mobilizing a defense. Throughout Outpost Meridian, lights began activating in sequence. Emergency beacons flashed, alarm systems activated, and to the alien soldiers it appeared that they were walking into a carefully prepared trap. Sir, Quantum reported, his multidimensional senses picking up the increased energy activity, massive systems activation throughout the settlement. They're powering up something big. Weapon systems? Vextar asked. Unknown, but the energy patterns are unlike anything in our databases, because they were civilian emergency systems, not military equipment. But the aliens didn't know that. Could be human experimental technology, Zara suggested. The Terran Federation has been working on some advanced defensive concepts. The team reached the end of the alley and found themselves in the settlement's central plaza. It was a beautiful space under normal circumstances. Gardens, fountains, and artistic sculptures that spoke of a community that valued beauty and peace. But in the pre-dawn darkness, with emergency lights casting ominous shadows and alarms echoing off the buildings, it looked like the perfect place for an ambush. Spread out, Vextar ordered. Watch for crossfire positions. As her teammates dispersed, Zara made her most crucial move yet. She activated her sidearm's targeting laser, a nearly invisible infrared beam that painted across Skrell's back. To human eyes, it was barely visible, but to the settlement's security cameras, which were equipped with infrared detection, it was a clear targeting marker. Hostile targeting systems active, she broadcast to the settlement security team. Recommend defensive countermeasures. The response was immediate. The settlement's few security personnel, who had been coordinating the civilian evacuation, activated every defensive system they had. Floodlights, warning sirens, and even the colony's construction equipment, which began moving in what appeared to be coordinated defensive positions. To the Crimson Talon team, it looked like they were facing a military-level response. This is not a civilian settlement, Vextar declared, his forearms adjusting his weapons array. This is a military installation disguised as a colony. Orders? Korath asked, though his voice carried a note of uncertainty that hadn't been there before. Complete the mission, but stay alert. These humans are more dangerous than... Vextar's sentence was cut off as Zara made her final preparatory move. She drew her M1911 pistol and fired a single shot directly into the ground at her feet. The sound of gunfire in the confined space was deafening, and the muzzle flash lit up the entire plaza like a miniature sun. But more importantly, it triggered every combat reflex her alien teammates had developed over years of warfare. Contact! Skrell screamed, spinning toward the sound of the shot. Where? Shadow demanded, her weapons sweeping the plaza. Sniper! Whisper shouted, diving for cover behind a decorative fountain. In the chaos and confusion, with adrenaline flooding their systems and their tactical assumptions shattered, the 11 elite alien soldiers did exactly what Zara had counted on them doing. They began shooting at shadows. Korath's plasma cannon lit up a building that might have concealed a sniper. Quantum's dimensional weapons tore holes in reality, searching for hidden enemies. The Savari twins began targeting anything that moved, including each other as they ducked between cover points. And in the middle of it all, Zara Chen holstered her smoking pistol and smiled. Buddha, 7 bullets left, 11 targets. But she had just turned the galaxy's most elite strike team against each other, convinced them they were facing overwhelming opposition, and gotten them to waste ammunition on empty buildings. The real fight was about to begin, and her enemies had already lost their most important advantage. They no longer knew who they were fighting. As energy weapons lit up the night and the Crimson Talon team descended into paranoid chaos, Zara began to move through the shadows like the predator she had always been. The galaxy was about to learn why human soldiers were legends, and why the most dangerous weapon in any conflict wasn't the most advanced technology, it was the mind that knew how to use it. 8 bullets, 1 human, and a lesson in warfare that would echo across the stars. The plaza erupted in chaos as the Crimson Talon team opened fire on shadows and empty buildings. Energy weapons carved through the night, their brilliant discharges illuminating the panic on alien faces as soldiers who had expected an easy massacre found themselves apparently surrounded by invisible enemies. Zara moved through the confusion like a ghost. Her human eyes adapted to the darkness, while her alien teammates' sensors were overwhelmed by the energy feedback from their own weapons. She had 7 bullets left and 11 targets to neutralize. But Captain Zara Chen had learned something during 20 years of combat that her enemies were about to discover. The most effective wars weren't won by superior firepower, they were won by superior strategy. Korath was her first target, and the easiest. The massive Bruthan warrior was the most dangerous in terms of raw destructive capability, but also the least intelligent. His plasma cannon could level buildings, but it also had a critical weakness that human weapons designers had identified centuries ago: power cell overheating. As Korath swept his weapon across the plaza, searching for targets that existed only in his imagination, Zara slipped behind him and did something that would have been impossible for any alien soldier. She got close enough to touch his equipment. Human hands were uniquely adapted for fine manipulation, and Zara's fingers found the plasma cannon's cooling vent and sealed it with a small piece of adhesive from her equipment kit. It would take approximately 90 seconds for the weapon to overheat and explode. She was already moving toward her next target when Korath's cannon began to emit the high-pitched whine of an overloading power cell. "Weapon malfunction!" the Bruthan warrior shouted, trying desperately to eject the power cell before it could explode. The detonation lit up the entire plaza, and when the light faded, Korath lay motionless near the remains of his favorite weapon. 1 down, 10 to go. But Zara's alien teammates had no idea what had happened. To them it appeared that an unseen enemy sniper had somehow targeted Korath's weapon with surgical precision. "They have anti-material capabilities!" Vexstar shouted over the communication system. "Spread out! Don't present grouped targets." The team dispersed further, which was exactly what Zara wanted. Separated soldiers were vulnerable soldiers, especially when they didn't know who they were fighting. Quantum was next, and he represented the greatest challenge. His multi-dimensional existence made him nearly impossible to target with conventional weapons, but it also meant he experienced reality differently, from normal 3-dimensional beings. Zara had studied Nexari physiology during her consortium training, and she knew their weakness. While Quantum could exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, his consciousness remained anchored to one specific dimensional frequency. Disrupting that frequency would force him back into normal space, making him vulnerable. The settlement's power grid included several high-energy transformers that could be overloaded to produce specific electromagnetic pulses. Zara reached one of these transformers and began making precise adjustments, using her knowledge of human engineering to create a resonance frequency that would interfere with Nexari dimensional phasing. When she activated the pulse, Quantum materialized fully in 3-dimensional space for the first time in the battle. and found himself standing directly in the path of Skrell's tentacle weapon, which the Vorthak had been firing blindly into what he thought was an enemy position. The energy discharge caught Quantum's center mass, and his multi-dimensional scream echoed across several planes of existence before cutting off abruptly. 2 down, 9 to go. We're under attack by advanced technology, Skrell shouted, his tentacles writhing in panic. They're using dimensional weapons. The remaining soldiers were now convinced they were facing an enemy with capabilities beyond their understanding. Fear began to replace professional confidence, and fear made even elite soldiers sloppy. Zara capitalized on their growing panic by activating the settlement's construction equipment remotely. Heavy machinery began moving throughout Outpost Meridian. Excavators, transport vehicles, maintenance robots, all operating under automated programs that made them appear to be coordinated military units maneuvering for attack. "Armored vehicles!" Shadow screamed, firing at a construction loader that was simply following its programmed route to the mining complex. "They have a motor pool!" Whisper added, her plasma carbine lighting up a maintenance robot that was attempting to repair a damaged streetlight. The Savari twins began targeting anything that moved, their scales shifting to aggressive red patterns as their natural hunting instincts took over. But they were firing at civilian equipment, wasting ammunition, and revealing their positions to Zara's carefully positioned sensors. She took advantage of their distraction to approach the fountain where they had taken cover. The decorative water feature had been designed with human aesthetics in mind, which meant it included several hidden maintenance access points that were too small for most alien species to notice. Zara slipped through one of these access points and found herself in the fountain's underground mechanical system, directly beneath the Savari twins' position. She could hear their panicked communications as they tried to coordinate their defense against enemies they couldn't see. The fountain's water circulation system included several high-pressure pumps designed to create the artistic water displays that made the plaza beautiful during peaceful times. But those same pumps could be weaponized by someone who understood human engineering. Zara reversed the flow direction and opened the pressure relief valves, turning the decorative fountain into a high-pressure water cannon that erupted directly beneath the Savari twins' feet. The sudden deluge caught them completely by surprise, and their scale's natural reaction to unexpected moisture was to shift to a defensive configuration that made them temporarily blind. In their panic and blindness, the twins did what panicked soldiers always do. They fired at anything that moved, including each other. When the water settled, both Savari twins lay motionless on the plaza stones, victims of their own weapons and their failure to identify their targets properly. 4 down, 7 to go. But now Zara faced a new problem. The remaining members of the Crimson Talon team were professional soldiers who were beginning to adapt to their situation. Vexstar was issuing orders to regroup and establish a defensive perimeter, while the surviving soldiers were becoming more cautious and methodical in their approach. It was time for direct confrontation. Zara emerged from the fountain's access tunnel and activated her external communication system, broadcasting on all frequencies, so that every member of the remaining team could hear her clearly. "Commander Vexstar," she called out, her voice echoing across the plaza. "This is Captain Zara Chen, Terran Federation Marines. You are surrounded and outgunned. Surrender now and I'll guarantee safe passage off-world." The effect was electrifying. Suddenly, every alien soldier realized that their human teammate was not only still alive but had apparently been the enemy they had been fighting all along. "Impossible." Vexstar's translator made his clicking mandibles sound mechanical. "The human was with us. She's one of the team." "Check your positions," Zara replied calmly. "Count your casualties. Then tell me how impossible it is." The remaining 7 soldiers, Vexstar, Skrell, the Klitsch warrior, and 4 others, began to comprehend the magnitude of what had happened. Their primitive human teammate had somehow eliminated 4 of the galaxy's most elite soldiers without them even realizing they were under attack. How? Skrell's tentacles writhed with confusion and growing fear. "You laughed at my weapon," Zara's voice carried a note of grim satisfaction. "You called it primitive, outdated, a museum piece." She stepped into the open, her M1911 pistol held casually at her side, its worn grip familiar and comforting in her hand. "But you forgot something important about human weapons. They're not designed to be sophisticated. They're designed to work." Vexstar raised his molecular disruptor, its targeting system painting Zara with a bright red laser sight. "One human against 7 elite soldiers. Even you cannot overcome those odds." Zara smiled, and for the first time since the mission began, it was a genuine expression of emotion. "Commander," she said quietly, "you've been fighting one human for the past hour, and you've lost more than half your team. What makes you think the odds are in your favor now?" These soldiers had built their reputations on technological superiority and overwhelming firepower. The idea that they had been outfought by a single human with a primitive weapon shattered their confidence and tactical assumptions. "Kill her!" Vexstar ordered, but his voice carried an edge of desperation that hadn't been there before. The 7 remaining soldiers opened fire simultaneously, their energy weapons filling the plaza with deadly light. But Zara was no longer where they expected her to be. Human reflexes honed by millions of years of evolution as persistence hunters were faster than most aliens realized, while her opponent's targeting systems calculated trajectories and optimal firing solutions. Zara simply moved, her body responding to instincts that predated civilization. She rolled behind cover as energy bolts seared the air where she had been standing, came up firing, and put her second bullet exactly where she intended it, through the power coupling of Skrell's weapon system. The Vorthax tentacle weapon exploded in his grasp, and the energy feedback surge sent him sprawling, unconscious, onto the plaza stones. 5 down, 6 to go. But now the remaining soldiers were learning to work together against a common threat. They began to coordinate their fire, using suppressing shots to keep Zara pinned, while others maneuvered for better positions. It was time to use the settlement itself as a weapon. Zara triggered the final phase of her plan, a complete overload of Outpost Meridian's power grid. The settlement had been designed with multiple redundant power systems to ensure survival in the harsh conditions of an alien world. But those same systems could be weaponized by someone who understood their operation. Every light in Outpost Meridian flashed simultaneously, creating a strobing effect that overwhelmed the alien soldiers' visual systems. Emergency sirens wailed at frequencies calculated to cause disorientation in most non-human species. And the settlement's magnetic field generators, normally used to protect against solar radiation, created electromagnetic pulses that interfered with alien targeting systems. In the chaos of sensory overload, Zara moved like the apex predator humanity had always been. Her third bullet caught the Klitsch warrior in his compound eye cluster, shutting down his neural system instantly. Her fourth bullet destroyed the power cell of another soldier's weapon, causing an explosion that eliminated 2 more enemies. Her fifth and sixth bullets were fired in rapid succession, each one finding vital systems in alien equipment or biology with the precision that only comes from decades of experience. When the strobing lights stopped and the electromagnetic interference cleared, Commander Vexstar stood alone in the plaza, surrounded by the motionless forms of his elite team. Across from him, Captain Zara Chen stood with her ancient pistol trained on his center mass. "1 bullet left," she said quietly. Vexstar's 4 arms trembled as he raised his molecular disruptor. "You cannot have defeated us. We are the Crimson Talon Unit. We are the best soldiers in the galaxy." "Were," Zara corrected. "You were the best soldiers in the galaxy. But you made a mistake that cost you everything." "What mistake?" Vexstar demanded, his weapon wavering as doubt crept into his voice. Zara's expression was calm, professional, and utterly implacable. "You underestimated a human." Her 7th bullet struck Vexstar's weapon with surgical precision, destroying its targeting system and causing a feedback loop that rendered the molecular disruptor useless. The hegemony commander stood weaponless in the pre-dawn darkness, surrounded by his fallen team, facing a human soldier who had outthought, outfought, and outmaneuvered the galaxy's most elite strike force. "Impossible," he whispered. "No," Zara replied, holstering her weapon. "Just human." 438B, casting golden light across the plaza where the Crimson Talon unit had met their defeat, Zara Chen activated her communication system one final time. "Outpost Meridian, this is Captain Chen. All clear. Hostile forces have been neutralized. Civilians can return to their homes." Throughout the settlement, families emerged from their shelters to find their community intact and protected. 230 innocent lives had been saved by one human soldier with an outdated weapon and the will to use it. As Zara secured the unconscious members of the alien strike team for eventual prisoner exchange, she thought about her grandfather's words about simple tools that save lives. Her M1911 pistol had fired 8 bullets that night. 7 had been perfectly placed shots that eliminated or neutralized threats. The 8th bullet, the first one she had fired, had been aimed at the ground, triggering the chaos that allowed her to turn the galaxy's most elite soldiers against each other. 8 bullets, 1 human, and a lesson that would echo across the stars. Never underestimate the species that had crawled out of the mud of a small blue planet and decided to make the universe their home. The galaxy would remember the night that Captain Zara Chen proved why humanity had never lost a war, and why the most dangerous weapon in any conflict wasn't the most advanced technology. It was the warrior who knew how to use whatever tools were available. And sometimes, just sometimes, an old gun in the right hands could change the course of history. This sun rose over Outpost Meridian, painting the settlement in golden light as families returned to their homes and children played in gardens that had been saved by 8 bullets and the will of one human who refused to let innocents die on her watch. In the years that followed, the story would become legend, and the legend would become truth. When the galaxy's best tried to break humanity's resolve, they learned why Earth's children carry simple weapons and complex hearts. Because sometimes that's all you need to save the world.